Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. Turkey has announced that it will be working with Iran to defeat the PKK militia in Syria. PKK's offshoot in Iran has carried out attacks there too. In the Syrian context, this signifies important cooperation between countries not usually on the same side in that conflict. Additionally, Trump has flipped on his declaration of fully withdrawing from Syria, saying he now fully supports American troops remaining there. To discuss all of that a bit further, we're joined now by Mr. Joost Hiltermann, who is the Program Director for Middle East and North Africa at the Crisis Group, and he's joining us via Skype from Brussels. We're also joined by Mr. Hamidreza Gholamzadeh, who is a political analyst, and he is joining us via Skype as well from Tehran. Thank you both for joining us. Hamidreza, I wanted to start with you. How do you react to Turkey and Iran working together against the PKK?
First, thank you very much for having me. The experience that Turkey and Iran had in cooperation regarding Syria was to some extent something successful, and we are seeing the fruits of that. So that model can be actually used furthermore, especially with American troops being apparently leaving the east of Syria, which is mainly Kurdish region. And this cooperation can help a better situation there, because we know that Turkey has very serious problems with Kurds, and it doesn't recognize them actually, we can say. On the other hand, Iran is mainly okay with Kurds in general, yet it has also suffered from terrorist groups and some terrorist activities.
Yeah.
So this cooperation can be something constructive in a way that.
But Hamidreza, would this anger Iranian Kurds, do you think?
I don't think so, because Kurds, actually the Kurd population are living in 4 countries mainly: Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. And the best situation for them is in Iran. They are recognized, they are living a good situation, and they have a good situation of life, and they are just being treated as a normal citizen like anyone else. Okay. And they are not facing ethnic conflicts and such things inside Iran. So they know that Iran doesn't have any problem with Kurds as being Kurds. But yes, when it comes to its security, that is the situation that Iran will not actually.
Okay, so let me bring that point up then with Joost. What do you make of that situation, Turkey, Iran working together against the PKK? Is that a good thing?
So there's 2 things. We have to distinguish between Kurds, and we have to distinguish by that with Kurdish political parties. Now, all of the states in which Kurds live, Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, have serious problems with the notion of Kurdish independence, which is what Kurds want, having no state of their own. And that is true in Iran as much as it is in Turkey and Syria and Iraq. But each group of Kurds in each state have worked out a different form of accommodation with their central government. And at times they have fought them, and at other times they have made peace with them or found some other kind of accommodation. Right now, for example, the Kurds in Iraq are living fairly peacefully with the central government, but there are also serious political problems between them. Yeah. In Turkey, there's an active insurgency because the political party of the Kurds there, the PKK, cannot agree with the Turkish Republic and vice versa about the status of the Kurdish areas in Turkey. Okay. And the conflict in Syria is a spillover from the conflict between the PKK and Turkey, because the Kurdish party in control in Syria is the Syrian affiliate of the PKK. Yeah. Now, both Turkey and Iran are opposed to this kind of Kurdish activism. Turkey can live very well with the Kurds in northern Iraq, the KDP and the PUK there, because they are willing to work within the confines of the Iraqi state. And as long as they do. And the moment that the Kurds in Iraq organized an independence referendum, Turkey and Iran ganged up on them. Yeah. And the same thing will happen in Syria.
So then I wonder about backlash then, Joost. Do you think the Kurds would, other Kurds, I mean, not just those who are part of the PKK or other groups such as that, do you think that they would rise up in reaction, considering now they're seeing Turkey and Iran unite against them?
No, but there's a long history of the states in the region uniting against the Kurds and dividing the Kurds. And there's a long history of the Kurds rising up at different times, but usually not about such actions, I would say, but more for internal reasons. So the Kurds are going to be very upset if there's going to be action against the YPG, which is the Syrian affiliate of the PKK, as part of a partial U.S. troop withdrawal. But I think more likely is that the YPG in Syria will try to find an accommodation with the Syrian regime in Damascus, because that is a better ticket toward the safety and progress of the Kurdish region, even if it's not going as far as they might have hoped.
Okay, so Hamidreza, just for our viewers' sake, just remind us about why PJAK, that is the PKK's wing in Iran, why is that of such concern for the Islamic Republic?
As I said, the security is very important, and Iran is very serious about that. And we had some terrorist attacks by that group. And it is interesting that Kurdish people of Iran have actually condemned that attacks and that terrorist attacks carried out by that group. So that is the distinction between Kurdish people and that political parties, as the other friend said. That is right. So Iran is serious about terrorist attacks, and of course serious about that referendum which was held, some sort of, let's say, having a Kurdish territory in this region, the Kurdish country, as they are, some of the Kurds are talking about, let's say, used to talk about. But Iran doesn't have any problem with Kurds working politically, just like what we have in Iraq. Iran has good relationships with the Kurdish groups and political parties in Iraq, in Erbil, and other places in that country. And this model can actually be used for Syria as well, as far as it is some political activities, some political groups officially working and recognizing the central government, working in cooperation with them. That would be something acceptable to Iran. And I'm hopeful that this connection, this cooperation between Iran and Turkey can help actually to move toward that, rather than just focusing on military actions against the Kurdish groups.
And that's a very good point, Hamidreza, which I wanted to bring to Joost, and I'll come back to you as well, Hamidreza, for that. Joost, do you think that this sort of cooperation between Turkey and Iran is a positive thing for the future even of Syria, then, in some ways, and a political solution there possibly? Or do you think that the Assad government, for example, may view this in a more negative light, possibly?
Well, each actor in the area has its own ambitions. And for the Kurds, it is to carve out an autonomous self-rule area for the Kurds in northern Syria. For Turkey and Iran, it is to prevent the emergence of a self-rule area. And for Damascus, it is to prevent the emergence of a self-rule area. But the fact is that the Kurds, since 2012, when the Syrian regime allowed the YPG to take control of the north, the Kurds have achieved a number of things, including a significant degree of autonomy, and but also because they have, and especially because they have benefited from U.S. military protection. Now, if the United States is going to withdraw most, if not all, of its troops, then that protection falls away. And then the question for the YPG is, what can they preserve from all the gains they have achieved since 2012? And maybe that they will preserve nothing, and I hope that that's not the case, of course. But if it were up to Damascus, it would be nothing. If it were up to Russia, which is going to be the main player there, it might be something. And there would need to be some kind of compromise between Damascus and Ankara that involves the YPG's presence in the north and the status of the Kurdish areas. But I think for Turkey and Iran, they may accept a degree of Kurdish autonomy in these areas if, in the case of Turkey, if the party is not the PKK. And in the case of Iran, any kind of autonomy for Kurds may be okay as long as it's not in Iran.
Hamidreza, I'm glad Joost brought up the issue of the pullout of U.S. troops, because as you may know, Hamidreza, now we know that there will be U.S. troops remaining in Syria. Donald Trump has flipped from his own decision before to say that all U.S. forces would leave Syria. What do you make of that decision by Donald Trump?
It was almost clear that the Americans will not withdraw all the forces they have in Syria, because it's something weird about the United States having his hands off a country in the Middle East, of course. And but the point is that being in Syria, just like before, was not didn't have any profit for the United States, and especially Mr. Trump, who is a sort of a businessman mind at office. So he is talking about costs and benefits of being present in Syria. It is not because of the connection between Iran, Russia, and Turkey being the main actors in Syria, of course, working with the Syrian government. And the Astana talks and all the talks that have been actually initiated by these three countries, the United States has been excluded from the scene in Syria. It doesn't have much power on the ground there, so it doesn't have anything to stay there. So it was not very beneficial, but still it needs to have, because it needs to sometimes maybe just as it has done before. Maybe it needs to steer some more conflicts there to not allow stability and peace to establish in Syria. Because of that, it's going to keep some forces there.
Joost, what do you make of the Trump decision, the flip-flop that now he's made? He's gone back on that decision to remove all forces. To be fair, I mean, he's removing a lot of them, seemingly, but leaving, from what I've understood, around 200 U.S. forces in Syria. What do you think the U.S. plan then is? Is it just the protection of the YPG?
Well, it's your guess as much as mine, and it's hard to keep up with all the flip-flops. But I think if the U.S. has set three goals in Syria. One is to defeat the Islamic State. The second is to curb Iranian influence and to block any kind of land route from Iran and Iraq into Syria and to the Mediterranean. And thirdly, to shape the political transition in Syria if there is going to be one. And clearly the United States wants there to be one. But with 200 troops on the ground in the northeast, close to the Turkish border, and another 200 at the Tanf military base that the United States has in eastern Syria on the Iraqi border, and maybe some European troops, if European countries agree, in addition to the 200 on the Turkish border, U.S. troops on the Turkish border, that's a symbolic presence. That is not going to stop anything. Much will depend on whether the United States can convince rather Turkey to enter into a deal where these American troops stay, keep the YPG far from the Turkish border, and that would satisfy Turkish concerns. But I'm not convinced that this is sufficient for Turkey. And I think for Turkey, what is more attractive is if the YPG made a deal with the Damascus regime, mediated by Russia, where the Damascus regime would deploy Syrian troops on the Turkish border and keep the YPG distant.
Okay, I'm going to give the final word to Hamidreza. Hamidreza, it's interesting, isn't it, that the U.S. has been nervous anyways about Turkey saying, listen, we're going to go after the YPG in northern Syria, and now we are adding Iran to that as well. Do you think that there will be almost a standoff or some sort of a conflict between the U.S. forces, even if they're just 200, and now Turkey/Iran?
I don't think so, because the United States has been using Kurdish people in eastern Syria. Let's not forget that the American forces tried to connect those three cantons in northern Syria at the border with Turkey, to connect all of them together so that they have a fully controlled Kurdish area in between the two countries, which was a problem. Could be a problem for both Turkey, Syria, and Iran. And it was Iran and Turkey cooperating with each other, actually not allowing this happen. in northwestern part of Syria.
Yeah.
So after that, with that failed mission, the United States is not actually seeing any benefit in Kurdish people there. So it's just leaving them aside because it cannot use them anymore. So it doesn't pay much attention, not much more than just words to Kurdish people. And so Turkey, even if it's going to attack brutally on Kurd people, I don't think that the United States would be very serious about taking care of the Kurdish people.
Very well. We'll leave it there at that. But of course, we read both of your times and of course your insight and analysis. That was Mr. Hamidreza Gholamzadeh, political analyst, speaking to us from Tehran. And we were also joined by Mr. Joost R. Hiltermann, who is the program director for the Middle East and North Africa program at the Crisis Group, and he was speaking to us from Brussels. Viewers, of course, as our guest there spoke about, there are a number of facets here. As I mentioned, firstly, of course, the decision of why Turkey and Iran would want to unite against the YPG group and that specific Kurdish group representing the PKK/PJAK for Iran. And then, of course, Trump's decision, his flip-flop on keeping U.S. forces, or withdrawing, I should say, U.S. forces from Syria. He's now gone back on that, keeping 200 from reports that we've understood here at Indus News. So we'll keep a very close eye on that fluid situation. What happens next? Will this become more explosive now that Iran and Turkey are uniting against the YPG? We'll keep a close eye on that, as I said, here in the scope. I'll be back, though, after a short break with our next segment. Stay tuned. Viewers, thank you for staying with us here in Scope. Now, the controversy over backroom deals in the purchase of French Rafale fighter jets has heated up as the Indian elections near. Modi denies the allegations, and his officials say the jets are needed now more than ever in context of tensions with Pakistan. Now, since Pakistan's downing of 2 Indian jets that intruded into its territory, an alert has been issued about India's desire for vengeance using terrorists in Pakistan, specifically in Balochistan and border areas. To discuss all of that a bit further, we're now joined by Mr. Raunak Kapoor, who is a TV and radio broadcaster on politics and legal affairs. He's also a qualified lawyer. He is joining us now from Mumbai. We're also joined by Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhary, who is a defense analyst, and he's joining us from Islamabad. We're also joined by Major General Saad Khattak, who is a defense analyst as well, and he is joining us from the Pakistani capital also. Thank you to all of my guests for joining us. Raunak, I'd like to start with you. What do you make of this growing argument over this Rafale fighter jet deal?
Okay, Waqar, one thing that I'd say at the outset regarding the Rafale deal is that the matter is currently before the Indian Supreme Court, which effectively makes it sub judice. So comments, I'd be careful with how I comment on it. The one essential summary is the government has a view on how the jets were procured from France. And there's a stark difference between what the original deal was under the previous government and the final amount that it was procured for, and eventually what the Modi government procured it for, the difference being nearly 3 times the amount. So that's just the basic premise of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, there are so many multiple sets of facts available that it's hard to align yourself one way or the other, depending on which side you choose to believe. There are loopholes in the government, in the current government's justification of why the defense cost as much. And of course, the opposition seems to have gone hard at them. Now, I'm going to leave the issue of the jets themselves aside. And the one thing we need to always understand, and I think this has been discussed previously on your show as well, that most comments at this point in time, Pakistan or otherwise, have to be looked at with one eye or one lens at the elections. A lot is seen to be said by the government in order to drive what seems to be an anti-Pakistan vibe in India, because it seems to be a narrative that they believe will work well and will hold them well in the upcoming elections. Whether it's successful or not, time will tell. But as far as what you said at the top of your show as to comments with regard to whether there is vengeance that is being sought or revenge that is being sought, I'll make it clear to your viewers in Pakistan that there are slightly contrary views that are coming through our armed forces and our army chiefs and our air force chiefs when they were questioned after Modi said that the Rafale jets could have made India's job easier, it'll help security, etc. He's essentially holding this against the opposition that because of their loopholes.
Raunak, I'm going to interrupt you just because, in fact, on your mentioned position, I'm glad you brought that up, of course. We know the Congress Party leader, in fact, Rahul Gandhi, spoke about the Rafale issue, and I wanted to, in fact, play a clip of his thoughts on that, and then I'll get to my other guests.
There is a new line now. Rafale's files have disappeared. But the one who did a corruption of Indian rupees 30,000 crore, for whom it has been clearly written in the file that he was conducting parallel negotiations. There will be no investigation about him. It is clearly written in the papers, Narendra Modi was doing parallel negotiations. It is clearly written in the papers that price was increased. And not just a single person. Everyone, even the negotiating team, has said that Narendra Modi did bypass surgery. France's president has said that the Indian Prime Minister told me clearly to give the contract to Anil Ambani. The Prime Minister's name is there, clear-cut. It is written in the file that the PMO is carrying out parallel negotiations. Then there should be inquiry about it too. The Prime Minister goes around saying, had the Rafale come in time? Rafale aircraft did not come in time because you were wanting to give money to Anil Ambani.
Okay, well, that was Congress Party leader Rahul Gandhi there giving his thoughts about this controversy over these fighter jets. Major General Saad Khattak, I wanted to bring you in and ask you then, what are your thoughts about the controversy? What are your thoughts about these Rafale jets overall?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think the Air Marshal will be in a much better position to comment on this part of the arm because he is from the Air Force anyway. I think these controversies would certainly be surfacing as the election season is on in India, and this mudslinging will continue. As far as its impact on the Indian sort of potential and capability is concerned, well, needless to say that it is a state-of-the-art aircraft and could have done better, but the point is that it also has to do a lot with the training and the resilience and the resolve of the people who fly these machines. So I think, Modi is sort of capitalizing on what he has lost on the battlefield in the shape of these two aircrafts and the loss of name at a time which is very critical for his election campaign. So I think all said and done, the controversy will have to be now faced by him, and I think the more he tries to sort of come out of this situation that he has created for himself, the more he is getting exposed because in the ultimate analysis, his intentions had always been bad. His intentions had always been to undermine Pakistan and the region through nefarious means and through the sort of atrocities that he is being known for committing against the other people. So this is what all I could say. I think the Air Marshal would, I think, add a better analysis with it.
Then I will then go to the Air Vice Marshal, Shahzad Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary, then what do you make of the controversy, and of course, about these jets?
Controversy is quite domestic and internal for India to resolve. I don't think we should comment on the controversy sitting outside in Pakistan. As far as the machine is concerned, it's a good plane. Obviously, we all know it's from France. France doesn't have a very good reputation in terms of contractual moralities and other transparencies that are involved with any such high-level and high-ticket purchases, unfortunately, although Pakistan too has been a customer of France for some years, so we know from experience. But that is that. I think as far as the technology is concerned, the technology is reasonably good. India made a good decision at the point of making that decision, which was 2012. They've been obviously considerably delayed now in getting these aeroplanes in the region and in their service. And that will tend to show when you continue to use the very old and vintage MiG-21 BIS for such a long time. So I think it's shown in their performance. But let me just add one thing. The Su-30, the Su-30 as it is called, is probably as good as, if not better, than the Rafale that India is getting. Remember, India is getting to replace the MiG-21 BIS, which is the lowest of the technologies that is there on the Indian inventory. So really, it will be a quantum jump in terms of the overall capacity of the Indian Air Force. But the Indian Air Force already had these Su-30s. So I wonder what additional capability will the Rafale bring to them in terms of what they were lacking. They weren't lacking much, except that, yes, they will add more beef to that particular level of capability.
Raunak, I wanted to get your thoughts. You've heard our experts there speaking about the plane and the controversy. What do you make of the plane itself, and how is this entire controversy being received there in India?
So obviously, I'm going to concede to the experts in defense when it comes to the particulars as to what makes the Rafale a superior aircraft in terms of technology, etc.
Yep.
We've read a lot about it from a purely lay perspective. I'm not going to opine on that. What I will tell you is bring out just a bunch of facts, which is the Air Marshal in India, when he was questioned after Prime Minister Modi's comments that when he went out and said Rafale would have helped us and we're in a better position to defend our country had we had the jets, and the opposition's holding that up, etc., etc. The Air Marshal categorically stated the MiG-21 was a very capable aircraft, and that eventually, as everybody knows, was the aircraft that responded and was the aircraft that Wing Commander Abhinandan was flying. So the official statement from the Army is that they're at no I would say disadvantage because the Rafale hasn't been procured. Now, it's for every viewer to infer on his own, but there seems to be two sets of, it's not the same line that the Air Marshal and the Prime Minister seem to be towing at this point. So you can take what you want off it, and then you can read between the lines and figure whether the Prime Minister is seriously looking at the Rafale jets as a form to seek vengeance, or whether this is big talk ahead of the elections.
Okay, then on that last point, then Raunak, that you just made, do you think that this possibly could work in the opposition's favor? Because obviously this has been a long-standing issue. The Rafale issue is not new, certainly, but
yes.
Do you think that this could bring down Modi in some way?
So, if you'll allow me a little time, because it's hard to formulate this point without understanding three things that somewhat cover the political and social mood in India. Of late, definitely, and since the Modi-led NDA government, BJP government came into power 5 years back. First, that this is a government that has a very nationalistic ideology when it comes to any issue. They associate themselves with India and India with themselves. So any question of the government, they look at as a question to the nation, which as most people in a democracy, as liberals, you tend to think you make that stark difference. You may question the government, you may question the government without questioning the country. But because of a nationalistic mood, you tend to get hostile, you tend to get intolerant. Second, that because of that, along with that view, they also control the narrative of the mainstream media. And I've seen previous shows of yours where you've shown how the entire airstrike was carried out by mainstream media here. I mean, it's well known and publicly documented that some of the top TV channels, viewed TV channels, have owners that are part of the BJP party. They're MPs, sitting MPs right now. So you can tell there's a clear propaganda that's at play. And third, they have an extremely effective and aggressive social and IT cell, which tends to push their view no matter what, and quite successfully, because a number of people are well convinced, and they also are hostile towards any contrary view. Now, once you've understood these three things, you can draw consensus. Now, I'm not going to comment of years well before me, but I can say India has never been as ideologically divided as it has been in the last few years.
Okay, so I'm going to cut in, Raunak, because in fact we have one more soundbite which we want to play, and I want to get our other guests to comment on that as well, and I'll try to come back to you if we get the time. This is Prime Minister Modi himself speaking. I won't describe the clip. I wanted to in fact play it and get a reaction then from our experts. Let's play that, please.
See today's headlines being made in Pakistan's newspapers. Statements by Indian leaders make headlines on Pakistan's news networks. These leaders make statements which are run on Pakistani televisions and are discussed in Pakistan's parliament. The country's army has displayed bravery. And I, friends, cannot wait for long. It is my nature to take revenge bit by bit. This is our principle, and we will beat you in your house.
All right, that was the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi there speaking. Major General Saad Khattak, I wanted to bring you back in and ask you, what do you make of that sort of an intention on the part of the Indian Prime Minister, him speaking about vengeance?
His intentions and about his ideology, with regards to Muslims in particular and Pakistan also. So I think as far as our preparedness is concerned, his intentions are very clear. We are all prepared, both all in the sky, in the sea, as well as on the ground. Politically, diplomatically, I think for the first time that I've ever come across, our diplomatic, sort of initiative has really put the Indian diplomatic initiative on the defensive across the globe, and I think that needs to continue. So I think what we have to do is that while we continue to, maintain our aggressive diplomacy across the world, bringing the true face of the Indian leadership, the current Indian leadership, at the same time we need to continue to have our guards up, because till the time the elections are done, or till the time the powers of the sitting governments are not diluted or transferred to the election commission, I think the Pakistani armed forces need to remain on guard, and they are on guard because we have no doubt about the intentions of the sitting government, and any possibility or any, for that matter, stupidity is expected from this government, which is now sitting in Delhi.
Okay, just before going to break, I wanted to get Raunak's, I know Raunak wants to say something. Raunak, I'm going to go to you. What did you have to add to that? What do you make of Modi's statement there?
There were two things that you asked me. One was whether this could work against him, this could play into the opposition. So what I said before of how different people view the government, right now the anti-Pakistan narrative seems to be the way the BJP wants to go forward. And it might very well be effective. Time will tell whether these strong words, appearing tough on Pakistan, appeals to a lot of Indians. Certainly a lot of Indians that voted for Modi and seem to be influenced by his extraordinarily powerful oratory skills, etc. So it's hard to tell whether this will actually translate into success in the elections. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Nothing can be said for sure on whether what Modi says will work for the opposition or work for him. That's just the elections will be the ideal litmus test for that. As far as what he's just said, I have seen the entire, he's been campaigning extensively, Mr. Modi, after the airstrike. And he continues to put forward the government's narrative, which disagrees slightly from what the armed forces have said. I won't get into that. But he's putting that forth. I think he's more reflecting on what he believes was a successful act of revenge to Pulwama. Okay. I do not see, in my personal opinion, as him baiting Pakistan or looking or threatening to initiate future measures, because it would be awfully silly. I'm no defense. I don't come from the armed forces. It would be awfully silly to say that on camera and live television to tell you that I'm all set to seek vengeance. So I don't think this is looking ahead.
Okay, we're going to go into a short break, but of course, do stay with us. We're going to continue this conversation after that. Please stay with us. Viewers, thank you for staying with us here in Scope, and we're continuing to discuss the latest between India and Pakistan's tensions. And of course, in the first half, we spoke about that Rafale deal, etc. We're still joined by our guests who are joining us in the first segment. Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhary, who's a defense analyst, is joining us from Islamabad. We also still have Major General Saad Khattak, who is a defense analyst as well, joining us from the Pakistani capital. And now we're also joined by Senator Anwar Haq Kakar, who is a senator in Balochistan, and he is joining us in our studios in Islamabad. We appreciate everyone staying with us, and first, Senator, for joining us here in Scope. Senator, I wanted to get your thoughts on a threat alert that has now come out, specifically in this threat alert on the part of Pakistan, issuing it, I believe, internally, from what I've understood, about India seeking vengeance since those two Indian jets were downed. And there's mention in that of terrorist activities, even in provinces such as Balochistan and others. What do you make of that?
Thank you for having me. I think so. What the world has witnessed, the brinkmanship between the two nuclear-armed states in the past week or so, there is a realization, probably on the Indian side, that the conventional assault is not the answer to the challenge. And they are probably now thinking or reverting back for their proxies, which they have been doing it for last so many years. I would rather call it almost a decade. They definitely would go back and revert to those proxies, particularly in the province of Balochistan and KP. And they would try to apply some asymmetrical warfare against the Pakistani citizenry, for which we need to be very vigilant.
Mr. Chaudhary, I wanted to bring you in and then ask, this alert goes on to say that, Pakistan is on high alert for sabotage of even CPEC projects, etc. That would be worrying, isn't it? It's right then for Pakistan to be on high alert.
Worrying, yes, but not bothersome, because the fact is that we've been fighting this war for a long time now. We've been into it for the last 10, 11 years, as a good senator mentioned. The issue is that there are just 3 to 4 different kinds of engagements that India can do with Pakistan. It can do a proxy, a subconventional engagement, which it has been indulging in for the last 10, 11 years now with Pakistan on our western borders, whether Balochistan or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the conventional that it tried this time and got blunted very, very badly by the Pakistani response to it. And then, of course, as the nuclear domain, I doubt they want to enter that domain right away. And the fourth is, of course, a negotiation or engagement, a diplomatic engagement where the two sides can sit together, resolve their issues. So these are 4 different planks of engagement, and taking the nuclear and the negotiation out, because that doesn't serve Mr. Modi's purpose. So he's got 2 others, of course, and he's tried both. So both have been tried out, both have been suitably responded to by Pakistan. So one, I don't find anything strange in there. Okay. Secondly, it just tells me India is what India has always been. And thirdly, whatever comes our way, we'll face it once when it comes. So yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be, you got to have your guards up, but that shouldn't scare you in any way. That's what we've been doing for the last 10, 11 years. So no change, nothing to worry.
Okay, so General Khattak, I wanted to get your thought then, because, it hasn't come up enough in conversation, I don't think, internationally, General, that, Kulbhushan Yadav, he also admitted that he had been sent into Pakistan specifically to support, terrorists in Balochistan, etc. That's an important factor to all of this, isn't it?
Yes, I think the Indian espionage activities and the intervention through the subconventional means like these terrorist activities has been well known for the last 17 years. We've been fighting this war, and their intervention, physical intervention through covert means in Balochistan, in Karachi, has been proved and admitted by Kulbhushan Yadav. As I often say, that I had been in Balochistan for a long time and had been, dealing with such type of things. They have a sort of consulate in Zahedan, they have a consulate in Kandahar. Those consulates do not perform any consulate functions. They are just there for, their activities against Pakistan, which Kulbhushan Yadav has already admitted to. So I think they are very aggressively, pursuing this this strategy of covert operations against Pakistan. And even now, we've been hearing last night that they've requested the NDS of Afghanistan to support them in sort of a covert activity, terrorist activity against Pakistan, and that is very much expected, and that is why I think there had been a lot of advisories from the government side to all departments and all everybody to be on guard, and the guards are up both on the frontiers, internal frontiers and the external frontiers. So let's hope for the best. As I said, there is nothing new for us. We've been doing it, we've been fighting it, we've been responding to it over the last 16, 17 years. So we will do it this time also. We'll have our guards ready, and anything can be expected from them. So this is what I can make from him. Kulbhushan Yadav's case is shut and closed, and I think something tangible needs to move with regards to his case too.
Senator Kakar, I wonder what you make then of Yadav's, his admission really that he'd been sent in to support terrorists in Balochistan, A, and then B, what do you make of if there is really a possibility of India, making such a miscalculation, such adventurism on the part of Modi? Do you think that that's a genuine possibility even now that we know that India really didn't succeed in any goals or missions it may have had through the recent escalations?
Well, the problem as far as I can see is that I personally feel that Indians are dwelling in the past. They are not coming out of the 1971 syndrome. You probably would have heard Mr. Modi boasting about his own personal role in 1971 and making of Mukti. They are, or they were at least, trying to recreate 71 in Balochistan. The blueprint was the same, the planning was the same. They were almost same sort of organization, different in name, but same in the nature. Mukti was there, BLA and BLF and BRA, these sort of organization they created, and they thought that sub-nationalist Baloch ethnism would cater for mass support, and they would lead it towards craving out of a new country by the name of independent Balochistan. So their plan was all set. As I was saying that they are dwelling in the past, they did not realize that this is 2002 or 8 or 10. The world has moved forward. So has Pakistan. Pakistan is militarily not the same country as it was in 1971. At a societal level, it has gone through tremendous changes. Pakistan's own project of nation building has gone through a lot. So all these factors altered the reality of 2010, 12, 19, so on and so forth. But when you are bigot, when you are myopic, you do not see things in the manner which are quite realistic or objective. Your own prejudice blinds you, and that's what is happening with the Indian side. All they have been left in last 2 decades is couple of individuals who are residing abroad and a few hundred bunch of people who are driven by more of economic reason rather than ideological reasons, who are playing a role of a proxy rather than someone who are leading the rights movement. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, the so-called that movement or insurgency has died down. It does not have any shelf life anymore. But yes, Indians would still try to bring violence, and they are only interested in creating theaters of violence in the internal part of Balochistan or even...
I'm glad you brought that point up, Senator, because I wanted to put that point to Mr. Chaudhary, if you allow me. Mr. Chaudhary, the Senator there brought up a very good point, didn't he, about you know, spheres of violence, etc., that India wants to continue to create when it comes to either Balochistan or other such venues and settings. What do you make of that and the lack of success that India has had in that regard, if we're looking at, you know, the entire breadth of this policy?
Yeah, I think we make a basic mistake when we compare 1971 with today's environment, or for that matter, what was formerly East Pakistan with Balochistan, 2 different geographies, 2 different masses of population, and many other factors which actually led to East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh at that time. Of course, there was political reasons as well to it. But Balochistan is not East Pakistan. Balochistan is not 1,000 miles away from West Pakistan. So that is one. Secondly, of course, Indians will try what they've been trying. I think the biggest comfort that Pakistan can take is that despite the Baloch insurgency having been that old, some parts of it having, some parts of the Baloch population having been disaffected with the Pakistani state. Despite that, this particular movement or whatever people try and convert it into, especially from India, have failed at it desperately, and that shows in how Balochistan has traversed its difficult times in terms of its own integrity as well as being a part of the country. So I think we are beyond that point. Secondly, India will keep trying that. India's Kulbhushan Yadav, as you mentioned, is a trophy that Pakistan has and which Pakistan must hold on to for as long as possible. That's the proof, living proof of India's dirty ways in Pakistan. So I don't think we need to give it up as quickly as we send Mr. Abhinandan back. So I think those are the successes that Pakistan is looking to. Internally, yes, Pakistan needs to do more for Balochistan. We must look at its internally in a little more detail as to what it needs. And those are the political actions needed within Pakistan, which Pakistan must follow up.
Okay, so I'm going to give the final word, Major General Saad Khattak. General Khattak, what do you make then? What are your final thoughts then about India's actions vis-a-vis supporting, continuing to support terrorists in Balochistan? Do you think that's sort of a policy that India isn't even revisiting it, you know, thinking about its lack of success, that it keeps trying something that's just not working?
Well, India is not revisiting it. They are doing it every day in and day out. They have never stopped, actually, that intervention in Pakistan, but it is only a matter of how much they succeeded or they succeed. It's an ongoing war, you know, 5th generation war that is going on, and they are doing every day, trying their best to ensure that some sabotage activities takes place in Pakistan. And there are every now and then there are a lot of such activities, attempts of such activities being stopped by our intelligence agencies. They do not come in the mainstream media because the mainstream media covers only those activities which have mostly negative fallout or human loss or the material loss. So the point is that they have never given up on that strategy against Pakistan, the covert strategy against Pakistan. They've been doing it over the last couple of years. They will continue to do it. If they are unable to do anything, or they think that it is not politically viable for them to do anything on the conventional front, they will continue to have that policy. Rather, that policy continues, and therefore, I think on the internal front, we need to be even more on guard, because we know that on the external front, the armed forces of Pakistan are fully on guard. I think nothing much they should be able to do, but I think on the internal front, because there are other government agencies, the civil agencies like the police and like the civil armed forces, like the civil intelligence agencies are involved. So they need to gear up and need to be more sensitized to ensure that they do not succeed in any covert activity, sabotage activity internally.
Very well. We'll leave there as our final word, General. We appreciate all of you joining us and for your time, of course, and your insight and analysis that you brought to this discussion. Let me thank our guests there. We were joined there right at the end by Major General Saad Khattak, who is a defense analyst as well. He was joining us on the line from Islamabad. We were also honored to be joined by Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhary, who was speaking to us from Islamabad as well. He's a defense analyst also, and we were also joined there by Senator Anwar Haq Kakar, who is a senator of Balochistan. He was speaking to us from our studios there in the Pakistani capital. And earlier, of course, we were joined by Raunak Kapoor, who is a TV and radio broadcaster, and he was speaking to us from Mumbai. Now, viewers, as all of our guests there and experts have spoken about, the Indian elections play a large part in all of India's recent actions. Then, of course, there is that Rafale deal, as I spoke about in the first segment of this specific topic. Towards the end there, then we spoke about the threat level that exists right now vis-a-vis any Indian attempts at vengeance. But as our guests say, this has been a long-standing Indian policy to use terrorism in areas like Balochistan and elsewhere in this country. We'll keep a very close eye, of course, on that fluid situation here in the scope, but we'll leave it there for now. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.